So then we are back with some more understandings from the time of the second tabernacle services, where we find the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. As per Yeshayahu the prophet, we find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the returning of the cities of the Mashiach laid waste for many centuries. As we read it in Yeshayahu the prophet, it's always important understanding a section of the time of the restoration period, because Daniel, the great prophet, he explained in details regarding the restoration period and also the economical section of this particular area related with the nations involved with the trade of the end. Daniel, however, explains the weakening of a system. Now, as we understand, Daniel, he was a prophet on behalf of the Gentiles more than tabernacling. And when he explained that later on the understanding related with the ships of Kittim requires a bit of knowledge of what these were, when then the great prophet began his quest of understanding these particular prophecies, as he asked the angel later on if he could understand what it meant. And the angel said, close the understanding, because it's for the time of the end. But then what is then the portion that relates with the ships of Kittim? Does it truly explains an economical system weakening? Well, as the Holy Scripture, we have to understand these sections as per the knowledge and understanding of the designer. So then we understand these particular sections when the prophet explains situations in abstract forms of explanation in the Hebrew language. Now, those people with a bit of knowledge of the language, they truly can relate with this, because the Hebrew language discards any form of abstract form. Now, the problem is, how can a person explain the future events without sections related with abstract situations? That's why it's very important glancing at these, because it positions these factors or these events, and at least in a language that people can understand. Now, the ships of Kittim back then explained a very powerful section of the world related with ships and navy. Back then it was very important, because a lot of trade was done via sea. Now, the analogy that the prophet is using, he also very wisely, unknowingly, only the divine knew this, not even Daniel himself, because there are events in the future that during the time of Daniel, 500 years prior of the coming of the Mashiach ben Yosef, he had no clue of what was going on in the future. He knew that a certain way, certain events would take place in a certain way, but he had no idea what these ways were. Now then, the United States has a new government from the 20th of this month onwards. Very interestingly, the nations are not truly in line with the politics and economics of the West. So in a very simple understanding is this: this new president is going to force the retrieval of the military forces of the United States from many portions of this world. Now then, there is a very important section on the 21st verse of the 11th chapter, stating very importantly a system that was despised. Now, for the understanding of the restoration period, Daniel is explaining not a nation being despised, but a system being severely weakened because of the times and the seasons have changed in a transitional time from the New World Order that had ended and the restoration period from the teachings given earlier. And these teachings are found mostly from the first son of Abraham. Then for some people, these understandings, sometimes they do not make any sense because people do not relate the original manuscripts as then the original word of the divine. They relied for so long on a scripture that unfortunately does not give many details regarding the events yet coming. So this new president, at some point, is going to provoke the anger of so many countries. And precisely the ships of Kittim are related with the ships of the United States. There are a lot of sayings regarding the prophecies, even the divine himself, spoken of Yeshayahu, Yirmiyahu, Daniel, Ezekiel, explains very simply the importance, and even sometimes with Moses, that when the circumstance spoken of does not take place, then it was not a word spoken by the divine. However, the words were already spoken. The only task undone is the identification of these particular events. And the ships of Kittim are directly related with the 21st verse of the 11th chapter, because these links the weakening of the system and the release of the international world, the international market for the trade of the East. Now, the best way of understanding these prophecies is giving a bit of time. But thus far, what was spoken as far as the system of the Chinese, the situation of the kingdom of the East, the kingdom of the North, the kingdom of the South, if you listen to those audios and you grab a map, you're going to find more than 90% is true. Now then, during the time of the 1,000 years of deceit, or the New World Order, the divine has let the world do whatsoever it wanted. Now, the restoration period is not so. There was a world order generated certain aspects and dynamics from nations that were organized in a certain way outside of the period that Daniel has in a specific way explained. Now, in Daniel the 12th chapter, it explains sections related with his people roaming in the earth for some time. Now, this roaming period is the 1,000 years of deceit, and this time is already gone. Now then, this truly does not explain in details, and it's not in chronological order. Very importantly, Daniel was explaining sections of the Gentile world. This is not related with tabernacling. Sections of this particular prophecy relates with trade, relates with computerized systems that back then Daniel related with what he was doing, but he never imagined they would have machines that would simply make transactions much faster than what he was doing. That's where then the high knowledge comes from. Now, it is true that besides trade, other knowledges have emerged. But the focus of these prophecies is not truly the knowledge other than trade. Because in order for us to have an understanding of this particular prophecy, then revelation or Galah develops in a certain way, so then when we are reading the 8th chapter, in reality is the 20th. So then, we are in a very important, momentous period, and we're going to evaluate in the next 40 years the absolute discrepancy of ideology and the way this world should run. So then, understandably, reading these particular prophecies gives us a few clues of why then this system that's already weakened severely then provokes in the world such anger that then the ships of Kittim were used as a historical fact back then, that is projected reflectively of the systems of the time of the restoration period, where then the kingdom of the East then becomes more prominent in the world. So then, the best way of understanding these prophecies is waiting for the next 40 years. But then take note, because the exact understanding of the ships of Kittim is related with the weakening of the system. There are some portions of our military that are being deployed to the area of the Soviet Union, the Northern Kingdom. And interestingly, these prophecies of Daniel, they are very clear regarding then the kingdom of the north. Now, in order for a person to understand these prophecies, he must have a structure that was already given before, based from an analogy of the holy feasts. and the significance of the period of the time. Thus then the times and the seasons. So then, because of this fact that is becoming a reality, not only the system is weakening, but then there is a provocation in a world of such a level that then brings this particular retrieval, and at the same time brings organization in the area related with the place beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, speaking in a way that is southwards. Now it is south because of trade of the world, not because of tabernacling. And there is a flow of armies then going from north to south and vice versa. But this is more for the future. Now, when a government is power hungry in any level, then becomes very dangerous, because the times and the seasons are not prone. They are not in favor of a period of time of forcing a situation to go in a certain way. Now, what this new government is trying to do, it won't work. Not in the way that they are having plans with. It simply won't work. And in fact, that's what's going to provoke the retrieval of our military people from overseas. Now, Daniel the prophet explains the kingdom of the north, and these are scripture. Those are not my words, your words, or the words of the world. This came directly from the divine, and it states very clearly, and when the years come, he, the kingdom of the north, because of the content related, shalt certainly come with a great army in much equipment. This equipment is related with military equipment, and it's directly related with the kingdom of the north. So it's already given a few understandings of the military of the world versus the trade of the east. Explain the weakening of a system in explaining the retrieval. So during this momentous period in this country's history, we're going to observe many layers. And these layers are going to show itself as far as the prophet explaining the prophecy. Very true. Now a person might say, obviously those people who are ignorant of the holy instructions of the Holy Scripture, and some people, they don't know any other way because they were never exposed to the original manuscripts. They have a tendency of saying that people are not very optimistic, or being against the country, or finding any other reasons why then the country in the system, why it should not work. But the time and the season is for the kingdom of the east, the kingdom of the north, and tabernacling in the kingdom of the south. Now then, when a person is wealthy and power hungry, a person becomes blind. The king of Babylon came a point in his life he was absolutely blind. The power was so much that he began to say situations against the divine. And the divine then had shown him what was going on. Now, during this period of time is not for this country. The divine is organized in this period for the restoration, and these are delineated by the prophets many centuries ago. Now, because of a translation that is barely 1,000 years old, translation, and speaking of the Holy Nation and the prophets, that's more than 2,500 years ago. And beyond this, and there is absolutely no comparison. People are dealing with a translation of original manuscript, and they want the world to run in a certain way. But this world doesn't belong to anybody. It belongs to a designer that designed in a certain way, so then people can save their souls if they understand Galah, or the revelation. So then, these layers are going to show us a few clues of the weakening of this system that the translation explained as despised. So the best way of making sure is by giving time. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.